Hey guys, and welcome back to another DrAce video, and today we're going to be playing MotoGP 22, and today I wanted to take a look at electronic settings for each individual category within MotoGP. Now I do get asked about electronics quite a lot, and that is why I decided to make this video today. The questions I usually get is, what electronics should I be using, what electronics do you use, and what do you recommend for new players, or even players that just want to get a bit more speed. Now for me, as a very sensitive rider, my electronics are quite low. If you're more heavy-handed, you'll probably appreciate the higher electronic settings. And the way I'm going to describe higher versus lower is by looking at the numbers in the bottom right corner of your screen. So TCS goes from 1 all the way up to 5. Now if you look at these as a percentage scale, 1 being at 0%, 1 is effectively turned off, 2 is at 25% traction control, 50% for 3, 75% for 4, and 100% for 5. Now anti-wheelie and engine brake do the exact same thing, so if you look at those scales and roughly gauge where it is, 25% is TCS2 currently for me, and 25% for anti-wheelie as well. Now if you're not aware what traction control is, it basically, the higher you have it, the least amount of slipping and sliding you will have when you bring on the acceleration abruptly. Now if you have it turned off when you bring on the acceleration, it is going to start to slide, it's going to lose traction, it's not going to grip. Now if you have it full, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be really tight, but it is more difficult to gain speed because there's not enough power going into the rear. At least that's what I found from my experiences. Regarding to anti-wheelie, the higher you have that, the less the bike will wheelie, but the power will be reduced because it needs to reduce power to stop the front wheel from going up. If you're just absolutely pulling back on that trigger, then the bike needs to stop itself from wheeling somehow, and unfortunately you're not doing it on the trigger, so the anti-wheelie kicks in and stops the bike from wheeling. If you have it turned off, find yourself bringing on the power just a bit too much, the front wheel is going to go up straight into the air. Now moving on to the third electronic setting, and that is engine braking. And how engine braking work is, when you deaccelerate by letting go of the acceleration and begin to brake, you'll start to downshift, and as you downshift, the bike will then begin to slow down quicker with the engine braking taking effect, because once you deaccelerate and downshift, the bike will then start to deaccelerate naturally with the engine and with the brake. I do believe it's some way of reducing the amount of airflow into the bike. I'm not entirely sure how it works, but the most important part is that it helps slow your motorcycle down, so ideally have that quite high if you are struggling with the braking. Now engine braking 4 and 5 are broken in MotoGP 22, so the maximum you can actually use is 3. Now I'm guessing once they update the game it'll probably be fixed and it'll be back to 4 and 5. So to conclude this particular lap, I want to just explain what I use and why I use it. Traction Control 2 is my comfort zone because I do find that I can have a good balance with acceleration. I also find that it's not too aggressive on the acceleration and the tyre is not going to lose too much traction. Anti-wheelie, more than happy with that on 2. It's something I seem to use for all of them now, apart from the lower classes that may not have anti-wheelie. 2 is the go-to for me. I find that it doesn't reduce speed, and it also gives a nice balance when you really bring on the power and bring on the acceleration. It doesn't really kick up the front wheel that much. Engine braking 3, I used to have it on 4, but unfortunately the game is broken so you can't use 4. Happy with 3. Really happy with 3. I think that's a good balance for me. And the final thing to mention is something I've been trying out in this video, but I'm actually not going to use it on the next lap, and that is the ride height device. Yes, MotoGP exclusive. I don't know how I feel about ride height device. I mean, I used it in the other 2 laps, and now this lap I'm not using it, and already we're pretty much on it by 0.4 of a second. Not a fan of it, but the ride height device, to be explained, it basically just stops the bike from wheeling, but you do lose a lot of power. I find that you are much slower when you enable ride height device, so to be honest with you, I just turn it off. It does have a good animation when the bike squats down like they do in real life, but it just doesn't thrill me. I don't tend to use it very much, and honestly, I do and don't recommend it. I mean, if you are really struggling with acceleration coming out of some corners, use it. If you're looking for immersion, I guess use it, because that's what they do in real life, and if you just want to be fast, just don't bother using it. That's pretty much it. But we'll finish up with MotoGP now, and we'll start looking at the other classes to also explain. So now moving across to Moto 2 with Ayagora here in Jerez. Now one thing I will say is that I am using real electronic settings. It doesn't really make a difference for MotoGP because electronics as assisted or real are the same, but for the lower categories and the older categories, real electronics changes things because you have limited with what you can use, and that is because the real bikes in real life don't have anti-wheelie in Moto 2, and they don't have traction control in Moto 2 either. You'll find that with some of the next classes as well when we discuss them. So if you want anti-wheelie with these bikes, or if you want traction control with Moto 2, then just change your electronic settings to assisted rather than real. Something for me, I much prefer having the real settings rather than assisted, so that's why I'm using this. So literally for Moto 2, the only thing I'm going to change is engine braking. Everything else is done on the controller, so trying to avoid the wheelie, I'm just going to push forward in the analog stick a little bit more, maybe trying to avoid the wheelie by reducing the acceleration coming out some corner. If I find the tyre is just slipping and skidding everywhere, I'm just going to reduce acceleration as well. Now, if you are looking for a bit of assistance and understanding bike control, I have done a video just recently on a guide on how to manipulate the controller the correct way, how to bring on the acceleration correctly, and I've done this with a controller overlay so you can get a good visual representation of how it needs to be done. But going into the final corner here in Jerez, Moto 2 is pretty much that. Engine brake is down to 3. As I mentioned, if you are struggling, don't hesitate to change from real to assisted electronics. Now, a good place to start off with learning traction control is here in Moto 3. The 250cc motorcycles aren't punishing, they are very forgiving, and honestly the feeling of traction control anything higher than 1 for me in this lower class is just awful. I need traction control 1. I find that I can get the most amount of power, the most amount of feeling, and the best acceleration I can possibly get in the lowest traction control setting. Now, something I will recommend is that if you try it here, because 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 aren't that much difficult to learn and aren't much really to adjust to. Now in MotoGP, 5 to 1 is quite an adjustment, and here in Moto 3 it's a very gentle learning curve. So if you want to reduce traction control, maybe you think that that could take you to the next level, try it here in Moto 3. Spend some time here just trying it on the highest, lowering it down, trying it down on 1. And honestly, you will find that these bikes can pretty much go full pinned to the acceleration, and they don't tend to high side. Unless you're Gabriel Rodrigo, Moto 3 riders don't tend to high side in this category. So definitely try it out here, but I will explain my electronics once more just in case. Traction control on 1, engine brake on 3. I tried to go for the maximum amount of engine brake, and as explained earlier, 4 and 5 are broken, so 3 is the engine brake for me, ramming extender. Now, quite possibly to me, the most important category to change electronic settings on. When I've been doing the Season 9 2009 game mode, I have explained in many videos that I am using the particular electronic settings that you can see in the bottom right corner of your screen. And the reason why is I have no feeling whatsoever with any other settings than this. As I mentioned before, and I think I've mentioned it 1,000 times, I'm a rather sensitive rider. I need things to be the lowest as possible to really feel the gentleness of the acceleration of the controller. I don't do anything really abruptly, it's got to be gentle and controlled. And I don't find I can do that with anything higher than traction control on 1. The traction control with these bikes, for me, is the most important part. The anti-wheelie, I can change, I can fiddle around with, but traction control has to be on 1. When I did the Casey Stoner Challenge, the first original one from Season 9, I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it unless I had TCS1. And this is one of those ones that's probably going to divide us a lot, because if you're aggressive on acceleration, you might find this is the category you tend to struggle a bit with on the traction control. So definitely try them out. I'm going to explain to you that these are my settings and probably will never change, because I am so in tune with this particular class, and feeling TCS1 and Anti-Wheelie 2 is where I like it the most, so I definitely recommend you play around with it. But this category in particular, very important to me to make sure I get the traction control right. So for me, number 1. If you want to try anything else, try 2. It's not too bad, excuse the pun, but it's too much for me, it's too strong. But definitely with these bikes, they do tend to slide a lot when you bring on the power, so just be very careful and choose your electronic settings wisely. And now into the final category of today's video, and that is the Classics 500cc motorcycles. And if you weren't familiar with these bikes, there is no electronics. There is no glitch in the bottom right corner of your screen there. There's no issue that the electronics aren't appearing. It's because these bikes don't have them. Now using Wayne Gardner in the classic Donington Park, it is all done on the acceleration, all done with a gentle throttle control, moving the rider's weight in the best possible position to avoid wheelie and just being confident with the bikes. If you do struggle with this category and you really can't get into it without electronics, as I mentioned earlier, you can jump into assisted electronic settings and give all these bikes electronics. Now that does sound criminal to me because I do really prefer the real electronics, but there is actually also a benefit to this, is because these bikes can't manipulate the power settings. So if you want a race where you want to be really fuel conservative, you can't do it unless you change to assisted electronics. But what you can do is go to assisted electronics, turn everything off, but just keep the power setting and manipulate that however you want to. I know in the past I have actually done that, where I reduced the power setting down to 1, just to make the races a little bit more competitive, because of course, as we know, MotoGP 22's AI is a little bit weak, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, that's one thing. But guys, I guess that's it from me. I really hope this video has helped you, and I really hope you've learned something, and if you have, let me know in the comment section down below. I would like to do more videos like these just to try and help everyone out and get everyone a little bit quicker. But guys, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video. Ciao for now.
Oh hi, didn't quite see you there. Good to see you're still here. If this video didn't quite sate your appetite, then why not watch some more DrAce content by clicking the video shown on screen now. Furthermore, if you would like to follow me on social media, you can do so now with the links down in the description. Consider subscribing so you don't miss a single DrAce video.